Hello, this is Corbin again. I'm here to talk about the next chapter of Sam Weiss's book, Win at Losing, um, examining how our biggest setbacks can lead to our greatest gains. And in this one, we are taking a look into the example set by Greg Norman, a golfer of the a golfer of the 80s into the 90s, of course. And um, what one thing to note is that this is an example of somebody who was just always so close to his ultimate goal, but always seemed to slip, always seemed to fall short. And in this case, that ultimate prize would be the Masters, and the Masters is considered most important tournament, the most important tournament of golf, and there's just no greater prestige in the sport than being able to wear that green jacket. Um, but the setting starts with Sam Weisman recalling watching the 1986 Masters, and the 1986 Masters noted a very painful collapse, and something of note as well is that in 1986, in all four of the majors, he led going into the final round, and he lost all but one, which was the British Open that year. Um, which means which means that um, there may have been a pattern here, and of course this chapter does take a great look at contingency management. Contingency management is just planning for it's just planning for when things do go wrong, and like expecting things to go wrong, and knowing how to react when they do. Um, and in a sport of like golf, playing several rounds over the course of a few days, once you get to the end, when your shot or your swing can be deteriorating, or like my example is more with bowling, like it can be hard to maintain a great form, or maintain your same great function through the end. So when something starts to go off, just having a contingency plan and how to focus on that can come through. Um, and that, and this chapter does take a great look at that. I mean, Greg Norman certainly was an accomplished golfer. I mean, he was somebody that did shoot a record for the time of 24 under par at the Players Championship, and of course in the 1993 British Open, shot a 63 in some very blustery and difficult conditions. It was noted as being a blonde Australian guy who just exuded a high level of confidence. Like, he carried himself confidence, and a quote that really stuck with me is that the risk of the risk of being on top can set up a belief that you belong nowhere else, and and then that can certainly make it difficult if you don't have a good sense of contingency management, like not knowing how to react when things go wrong, or the times when things inevitably do go wrong. Now, there is now a big portion of the chapter refers to the 1996 Masters, and this is this is probably the Masters meltdown that Greg Norman is most remembered for, but it really goes into how he handled the loss, and how that loss ended up inspiring others. So um, of course, like, everybody, it was almost certain that to most observers, it was almost certain that he was certainly going to get it this year. Um, some that have watched him closely have noticed him experiencing with different swings, and notice and starting to notice some of the mechanics change. And like there are a few observers that also noted that, oh, he no, this could still end badly. He could still he could still lose in this case, of course. It was actually the CBS commentator of the event that actually noticed that, because he had a good close insight onto that. But it actually is a great adage into the old cliche. So the old cliche is really just focus one shot at a time. So a lot of times we're thinking of the end goal like too much, and for somebody who has been so close so many times and has come up short that many times, it is very easy to be um, sidetracked by that long term goal. But really, the only thing you can control is what is going on that one shot, that one hole, that one time. Um, and focusing on that one shot, focusing on that prize on the end can ultimately distract you and make that toxic toward the end. Contingency management really focuses on what you can do now. Um, Contingency management isn't about what's coming up at the end. Now, one of the golfers that Greg Norman was notably inspired by, of course, is that um, Jack Nicklaus. Jack Nicklaus is obviously one of the more legendary golfers. He's noted for winning 18 majors, but something that may be lost in Jack Nicklaus's legacy is he actually finished second in another 19 majors. And um, one thing to note that in most sports, in most professional sports, in a team sport setting, players are very much accustomed to answering questions in a press conference, whether they win or lose. And obviously, everybody enjoys the press conference after a win a lot better than after they lose. And some of the more memorable press conferences in sports have come after epic losses or epic meltdowns. Like, I'm a Colts fan, and Jim Morris' playoff meltdown is probably the most memorable press conference meltdown in sports. That happened back in 2001. But press conferences in many different team sports are just a part of the deal that everybody gets accustomed to. But in a sport like golf, a lot of just your average golfers that are not worthy of too much attention or anything, like, hey, they will just play through until Friday and they can go home. Like, they don't have to discuss anything that went wrong with anybody but their caddy. But to the golfers that um, obtain any national interest, they're the ones that do talk to the press. So as you can imagine, the sports media was just the story in the media. What was like the lucrative story was around, like, will Greg Norman get the Masters this year, or what happened on this one? Um, so one of the um, things that Greg Norman was inspired by in regards to Jack Nicklaus is how he handled those losses. And he spoke honestly. He was honest with himself about what went wrong, but was also willing to recognize the performances of his opponents. Um, so because sometimes Jack Nicklaus was on. Um, Sometimes there were some great, outstanding performances that were simply at Jack Nicklaus's expense, and that came in those 19 second place finishes that it came in. So while blowing the 6 shot lead in the final rounds, was definitely painful, and was definitely something that he had to be honest with. Um, he also he also did have to realize that his opponent in that round, Nick Faldo, also shot 5 under par, and that outstanding performance also added to the collapse. So when he was able to really face the press at a time when, like, it wasn't his best, he was able to just be honest with that. He was able to reflect on what was going wrong with his swing, and um, was also willing to give Nick Faldo his due congratulations for his outstanding performance that really also took him to the win. Because sometimes with everything that you can do in your performance, like, even if you're great, even if you struggle, I mean, there's always a likelihood that somebody might perform better than you on a given circumstance. But Greg Norman's exercise in humility in this chapter. Something to note is that in 1996, a 15-year-old Adam Scott happened to be watching that exercise in humility. Watching a guy come up short for a tournament that he's been so close to so many times and lost in a variety of different very agonizing ways. Um, and then it was always noted that, as a trivia fact, in the Masters, that no Australian had won in the entire history of the tournament, and that changed in 2013 when that very same Adam Scott, who was then 15, watching Greg Norman's example, was mentored by this same golfer, and in 2013, Adam Scott becomes the first Australian to win the Masters, and that just goes to show that carrying yourself can make your carrying yourself with this kind of humility can really endear you to a crowd. And as I was reading through this chapter, one thing I couldn't help but realize is, like, most people, like, we don't have to answer to a press conference after any of our events. So, like, it's like, who are we answering to? A lot of times we do answer to ourselves. But when I think of my loss, so, like, when I think of those times when I've had job interviews um, that didn't go well, because believe me, I've had job interviews that did not go well at all. I can't help but think that, after that disaster, how would I have handled a press conference? And I'm thinking the mentality of having a press conference, and, like, having that somebody set up where, say, you can, where, like, after you have a big event, after that somebody could just ask you questions about that could be a great practice and exercise. That could be a great practice and exercise on how to carry yourself when things don't go right. So, I do think it's an interesting question. If like if something happened in, like, your career or your life, and you had to answer to a press conference about that right away, how would you handle that? And you know what? I think if you follow Greg Norman's exercise in humility, then I think we have a great example. And it really comes down to you know being honest with yourself, assessing the situation, and knowing the factors that you can and can't be in control of, can help you set the right mentality and really make the most of those losses, because as we know, losses are just not something that we like, but if you don't know how to deal with them right, they can they can control you in a very negative way. Um, so um, just 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 know, as the prevailing lesson goes on, is always have a contingency plan, and always always plan for things to go wrong, and when they um, go wrong, just know how to react. And you may not be great at it now, but hey, if you make that a focus, you will certainly get better at that. Okay, well, that is the overview, and those are some of my thoughts on Greg Norman, A Masters in Humanity, and I look forward to covering the next chapter and sharing my thoughts about that.